Okay, so today's daf yomi is Kesubos Ayin Dalek Kesubos 74a. We are in medias race, as we say. We're in the middle of things. We're going to start 6 lines from the top of 74a, where the Gemara introduces us. Basically, the Gemara is continuing the conversation of what we had yesterday. So the Gemara says, "In Marnami, we learned there was a statement that Rav Acha Bar Yaakov taught in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and he taught the following statement." Hamakadesh al Tanai, if a man betroths a woman conditionally, basically he says to her, I am betrothed to you on the condition that you do not have any vows. And then after he makes his conditional betrothal, Uba'al, after he makes the conditional betrothal, he consummates the marriage. Divrei Hakol, everybody would say that under those circumstances, that since she has the vows, Rabbi Yochanan says that since she has the vows, that it's not a vow marriage. Even though he went ahead and then consummated for the purposes of the betrothal, he has not overridden the condition that he made earlier. And so therefore, the condition he placed on whether or not he would be betrothed to her still applies. And so therefore, they're not married and she would not need a divorce from him. That's the statement of Rabbi Yochanan, that even though you do a subsequent action, which might seem to negate the words that you said earlier when you placed the condition about whether or not you can marry her, Rabbi Yochanan says the subsequent action does not negate the potency of the conditional clause that you listed at the beginning. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said, this controversial statement. Also, it's controversial. He says, according to everybody, meaning to say, he says, even according to Rav and Shmuel, who argued about, and there was an argument yesterday, what was the nature of their dispute? But do they dispute even in the case of one woman or only by two women? But we see from here, he says, everybody would say that the conditional is still valid there, and that such a marriage is not a marriage, even though he had a subsequent action, which seems to say he was waiving his initial condition. So when Rav Acha Bar Yaakov reported this in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Rav Acha Bar Yaakov's nephew, the son of his sister, challenged it. Esrei Rav Acha B'rei Rav Ika Bar Achtei. He says his nephew challenged it. He says chalitza mutaz kashera. We have a brisa which says that if you have a chalitza is where the widow removes the shoe of her husband's brother, and thereby she says, I don't fall to yibum with you, I don't fall to ever a marriage. That if it's a mistaken chalitza or if it's a deceptive chalitza, it's kashera. Well, we'll see what chalitza mutaz is, and that it's nevertheless kashera. And in the yeshiva, they were sitting there and they said, Ezuhi chalitza mutas. What is this thing that's called a chalitza mutas? So says Reish Lakish, I'll tell you what a chalitza mutas is. So there's going to be a dispute about this between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. What's a chalitza mutas? Reish Lakish says, Kol she'amar la chalotzla ubekach hatakonsa. Reish Lakish says it's a case where the judge tricks the court. The judge tricks the husband. He says the brother. The brother wants to do yibum, and the judge tricks him and he says, listen, go do chalitza with her and then you'll be married to her. And he does chalitza and the judge says, just kidding, you're not married. We tricked you. So that the brisa says is kshera. But that's Reish Lakish's opinion. But we don't care really what Reish Lakish says here because the nephew is raising the question from Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, that would not be a valid chalitza. So says Rabbi Yochanan, Ani shona, I learned, Beinchin iskavein hu v'lo niskavnehi. Beinchin iskavnehi v'lo niskavnehu chalitza sabasua. I learned that both of them have to have intent or else it's not valid. Whether he has intent and she doesn't have intent, or she has intent and he doesn't have intent, I learned it has to be valid until both of them together have intent. And you want to say that it's a valid chalitza where the judge tricks him? For sure it's not okay. So therefore, what is Rabbi Yochanan say is the mistaken chalitza, which is okay? Says Rabbi Yochanan, Kol she'omer lo chalotzla almanash atitelcham matayim zuz. Any case where the court says to him, do chalitza, and then she'll give you the 200 zuz, and it's a conditional, and she doesn't give the 200 zuz. She doesn't give it to him. So what? Rabbi Yochanan still says it's kshera. So we see from here that Rabbi Yochanan says even if you make a condition a conditional element to the contract, to the agreement, and then subsequent to that, that you do an action which the condition is not, and the condition is not there, it doesn't matter. The subsequent action proved that you waived the conditional element of the contract. So that's the case. So the Gemara says, so you waive the conditional element of the contract. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. Tonight, since he did a subsequent action that was related to the contract, he therefore waived the condition. So in the case of where he says, I'm betrothing you on the basis that you don't have any vows, and then he basically has relations with her, he's waived the conditional clause too. So Rabbi Yochanan should say that they're married there. So it's a contradiction about what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. So in the case of the marriage, Rabbi Yochanan had said that that they're not married, even though they had relations. It didn't override the condition. But in this case of the chalitza, Rabbi Yochanan says that the subsequent chalitza action overrides the conditional clause. So the Gemara says that Rav Acha Bar Yaakov responds to his nephew. He says to him, Amar le, Barbe Rav, shop your commerce. He says to him, my nephew, Torah scholar, do you think you're saying right? You're not saying right. You're saying incorrectly here. Michti ko heicha, michti, since kol tanai mehecha gamrinan. Where do we know the concept of a conditional clause, the power of a conditional clause? Where do we learn it from? What's the basis of a conditional clause? What's the basis that you could put a condition onto an agreement and then it's going to be effective? We learn it out from the Bnei Gad and the Bnei Ruvain. These are the two tribes who came to Moshe and they say, we want to stay on the other side of the Jordan River. We don't want to enter into the land of Israel. So he said, we want to stay on the other side of the Jordan River. And then when they said that, Moshe said, I'll let you stay on the other side of the Jordan River as long as you first fight in the land of Israel, and then you can go back and conquer it. So Moshe says, if you fight in the land of Israel, I'll give you the other side of the Jordan River. So that was a Tanai, that was a condition. The Avshar Kayuma Yidei Shliach, that Moshe could allow, that Moshe was going to appoint an agent to fulfill the condition. Moshe was appointing Joshua to fulfill the condition. So therefore, since that was a condition that you could fulfill through an agent, ki hasam have tanai. That's going to be a conditional clause. That's always going to be effective, even if you do a subsequent action which seems to negate it. But tanai delo afshar l'kiyum al yedei shliach. But a conditional clause that you can't keep up, that you can't uphold through an agent, ki hasam. Lo ave tanai. So, but a conditional clause that you can't do through an agent, that's not going to be a conditional clause. And so what's the case of a conditional clause that you can't do through an agent? The case of the chalitza. Since the chalitza has to be done without any agents, she has to remove the shoe from her husband's brother, or else there's no chalitza. So therefore, the conditional clause there is not effective, and that's why we're saying the chalitza there works, even though she doesn't give them money. So Gemara says, well, 1 second. But the case we were challenging Rabbi Yochanan, where he says that the conditional clause works, was the initial case where we said, I'm betrothing you on the condition that I give you, that you don't have any vows. And then he consummates the marriage through relations. And we say the conditional clause still works. Well, you can't appoint somebody else to be your agent for consummating the marriage through marital relations. The intercourse, that case you can't do through an agent. And we say that the conditional clause overrides the later action. Rabbi Yochanan said according to everybody. So that you can't do through a third party. Gemara says, okay, that case is separate. It's true. Yes. Generally speaking, you need a condition. You need to be able to do it through an agent. That case is its own status because it refers to betrothal. And also mishum de iskush havayos adadi, because we compare. There are 3 ways and you can betroth a woman: through money, through a contract, and through intercourse. So since the money and the contract can be done through a shliach, and so therefore you can make a conditional clause on the money and the contract. So therefore we say also you can make a conditional clause related to the intercourse. And so therefore that's why we say that works. So Amar Avula Bar Abba, Amar Ula, Amar Abba Lazar, Hamakadesh b'malveh. So let's say you betroth the woman through a loan. So basically, let's say the woman owes the man $100, and because he took her out to dinner, and he says, I pay for your $100, and now he wants to betroth her, and he says, I'm waiving the $100 that you owe me. Rashi says, Shemacho amilva shechayev aslo. Now we said in Tractate Kedushin that that's not a valid betrothal, because really when he lends her the money, that money was intended to be spent. So it's like she doesn't have it in her possession anymore. And so therefore, if you betroth somebody through a loan, it's not valid. So that's one case in the Braisa. So that's one case. It says Rabbi Lazar, Amikadesh b'malva, that if you betroth somebody through a loan. Ubal, or else the second case is Ubal al Tanai, or you have relations conditional, basically. So he has relations with her, or so basically he does betrothal through a loan and then he has relations with her. And al Tanai Ubal, or he does betrothal through a condition and then he has relations, where Rabbi Yochanan had said that the condition is still valid. We'll see what it says here. The pachas mishava pruto ubal, or if he betroths her with less than a penny, it's normally speaking not a valid betrothal, but then he has relations with her. Divrei kol tzricha imenu get. Everybody would say that she does require a get. This contradicts Rabbi Lazar. It's contradicting what Rabbi Yochanan said, because Rabbi Yochanan said if she does a conditional marriage and then he has relations, then they're not married. And here we said it seemed to be explicit al tanai ubal, it is a get. So we see that they're arguing. So Amar Rav Yosef bar Abba Rav Menachem Amar Rabbi Ami Hamikadesh bepachos mishava pruto ubal tzricha mehenu get. So Rav Yosef bar Abba said in the name of Rav Nachman and the name of Rabbi Ami that somebody who is mikadesh a woman, he betroths a woman with less than a pruta, and then he has relations with her, he requires a get. He requires a get from her because he had the betrothal for the purpose of Kedushin. Even though he did the betrothal with less than a penny, but then he had relations with her. So the relations were obviously for the purpose of marriage. And so therefore he overrode the initial action of not betrothing her with less than a penny. Gemara says, Bahahu duotai. In this case, he doesn't make a mistake. Meaning he's only arguing in the case of the Shava Pruta because he knows that in the case where he betrothed her with less than a penny, he knows is not valid. So therefore, when they have this subsequent intercourse, he knows that he's betrothing her he's consummating for the purpose of marriage. Of a bahanach, but in all the other cases, he's going to think that they're married already, and so therefore he's not consummating for the purposes of marriage, and so therefore, in all those other cases, she wouldn't require a get. So that's the irony. That's the irony of that case. So Rav Kahana says in the name of Ua, so somebody who betroths on with a conditional clause, and then he has relations with her, he rules like Rabbi Elazar that she requires a get under those circumstances because he overrode the condition. But this was an incident that happened. And the Chacham said, if they want to get divorced, they need a get. And this position, Ua's position, is contradicting the following source. So Ua's position that if she that where you made a conditional marriage and then they had relations, she requires a divorce. That conflicts with the following source, which says if there was a condition and they got married, they don't require a divorce. Because what do we say? It says in the text, that the verse says that if she had relations or she was assaulted and she was against her will, if she was not taken against her will, she's prohibited to be with her husband, meaning she had adulterous relationship. But if she was assaulted, mutera, she's allowed to go back and be with her husband. There's another woman who, even though she was not taken against her will, she's still allowed to go back to another man without a get. This is where the marriage was mistaken because it was done on a condition and the condition was not upheld. So therefore the subsequent intercourse is not binding and they're not married. Shafilu b'na murkav al kaseifa, even if her son is riding on her shoulder, meaning say, even if she has a child, nevertheless, we're going to say under those circumstances, even where she has a child, we're going to say, she could say, guess what? We're not married. She could say under those circumstances, she could say, we're not married, the condition wasn't upheld. So you could have a circumstance where they think they're married for 10 years, and then he finds the condition from the beginning and says, look, we were never married, or she says we were never married, and she doesn't even need a divorce. And so therefore, the subsequent acts of consummation don't take effect. Some people want to say that every marriage today should be done on a conditional clause, and that way you solve the aguna crisis, because you could just say, I'm marrying you on the condition that if I ever ask for a get, you would give the get. Or I'm marrying you on the condition that you're not the type of person who refuses a get. But the rabbis do not accept that solution, but some will say, look, this is a perfectly good solution.
What's the argument against that?
I'll come back to it in a minute. I just want to finish the daf and I'll come back to that. So Tana Rabbanan, so the rabbi said the following. So we're citing the following brisa. Let's say she goes to the chacham. Let's say she goes to a scholar, and she had made a vow. Okay, so he says this is a beautiful case. He says, "I'm marrying you on the condition you have no vows." Right? I'm marrying you on the condition you have no vows. She has vows. She has vows. Then he goes and she has vows. He marries her on the condition you're not a vegetarian. And she had taken a vow that she's not going to eat meat. But guess what? Then she goes to the rabbi the next day and he annuls her vows. Retroactively. V'itira, he annuls her vows. Mikudeshes. They're actually betrothed, because when you annul a vow, even though you made the vow 10 years ago, it's like you never made it. So then they're betrothed. So fine. But it's a rofe. But let's he says, I marry on the condition you don't have a broken nose. Now, broken nose is a bad example. I haven't married you on the condition you don't have any warts in your private areas. And what happened was she goes to the doctor, she goes to the dermatologist, Veriposa, and the next day she goes to the dermatologist and it takes off all the warts from her body. Then she's not going to be betrothed. Why? What's the difference? Why in the case of the veil? Exactly. What's the difference between the doctor and the wise person? So the wise, the scholar, he's saying that you never made the vow. He's retroactively annulling the vow. So it's like it was never made to begin with. We have a case like that in American law. You can retroactively say something. So even though you did an action, could we say it says though you never did it? The doctor is not retroactively. The doctor's only healing it. The doctor's only healing it from here on. You find the case, Jeff?
I'm trying to think of the situation. I mean, you can void. You could have a contract and ultimately decide that it was void, which means from the beginning.
Okay, that would be good. So, but the doctor only heals from this point onward. So the Gemara says, is this really the case? Vatanya. So Vatanya, but we have a brisa which seems to say not like this. It's a chacham v'tira. It's a rofa v'repeat. Osa ain't a mekudeshes. But we have another source that says that even though he goes to the scholar, she goes to the scholar, and the scholar annuls her vow, she's still not betrothed. That the retroactive annulment of the vow doesn't serve to say, actually, now you're betrothed. It doesn't work. So one source says it does work, and then she's betrothed, and one source says it doesn't work. What's the difference? Says Rava, Amarava, well, Kasha, it's not difficult. Ha, Rabbi Meir, ha, Rabbi Elazar. One is Rabbi Meir, one is Rabbi Eliezer. The Rabbi Elazar, why? Ha, Rabbi Meir, the one who says, the source that says that she can annul the vow retroactively, and then they're married, even though she had vows, but because they're uprooting the vows to begin with. Who's the one who says it? That's Rabbi Meir. He says, a man doesn't care if his wife has to go up and show up in front of the court and annul her vows. The man doesn't care. It's not going to bother him. And so therefore, the fact when he says, I marry you on the basis that you have no vows, that's a condition. he doesn't care if in order to get to that point, she had to go to the court and annul her vows. That wouldn't have been a factor that would have bothered him. But on the other end, there's Rebbe Lazar who said, the second source is like Rebbe Lazar, who says, a person would not have wanted his wife to go to the court. A person would not have wanted his wife to go to the court and be humiliated in front of the court proceeding, get deposed by the Beis Din and start asking all these questions. It's embarrassing to have your wife go to the court and have to annul her vows. And so therefore, that would have been part of the condition. And so therefore, retroactively, it doesn't work under those circumstances. So says the Gemara, Mahi, where do we see that Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Lazar have this dispute? It's not. Because we have the Mishnah, we're going to get to this, God willing, and get it. So even though we're going to get to it in Gittin, I'm sure you remember it. We had it in Yevamos Chafei, Daf Chafei. So Amotias Ishto Mishum Neder. Let's say a person has to divorce their wife because she made it a vow. She made a vow. He doesn't like her vows, and so he says, "We're getting divorced." Guess what? Lo yachzir. You're never allowed to remarry her. Normally, when you divorce your wife, unless you're a Kohen, you're allowed to remarry her, as long as she doesn't marry somebody else in between. But if you divorce her because she took a vow, then you're never allowed to remarry her. Mishum Shemra, or if you divorce her because there was a rumor that she was adulterous, Lo Yachzir, you're also never allowed to remarry her. And the Gemara Mesechus Gittin gives two reasons. What are the two reasons? I'll read the Rashi. Where some are concerned that it'll come to a major problem. Because if you're going to say, if you're going to remarry her, maybe what's going to happen is she's going to go ahead and remarry, and then you're going to find out, well, guess what? These rumors were totally false. Or this vow that she took was uprooted by the Chacham. And so as a result of this, you'll say, well, if I had known that these rumors were false, or if I had known she could get rid of these vows, even if you would have given me $100, I wouldn't have divorced her. And so therefore, the sages say, if you're going to divorce this woman, it doesn't matter. For these reasons, it doesn't matter whether these rumors are true or not. You're never going to be able to remarry her. And if you love her, don't be careful before divorcing her. That's the first reason that the Gemara in Gittin gives. And the second possible reason is that we don't want the Benot Israel to be prutos b'arayos u'b'nadarim. We don't want the daughters of Israel to be prutos, basically it's a punitive punishment. We don't want them to be in the area of arayos and in the area of vows. And so therefore, we don't want them to be we want them to know that if you get divorced for this reason, you can never remarry. So therefore, we see from here as follows. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Kol neder she." So back to that Mishnah. Motzi es ishto mishum neder lo yachzer mishum shemra lo yachzer. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, "Kol neder sheyadu bo rabim lo yachzer." Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says that only if she made this vow in front of 10 people is he not allowed to remarry her, because he says, what's the reason? It's only because we don't want them to be prutzos b'nadarim. We don't want these women to take vows and be sinful in this area. And so therefore, if you make the vow in front of 10 people, that's a vow that can never be revoked. So if you make such a communal vow, that can never be revoked. So Rabbi Yehuda says, "Kol neder sheyadu bo rabim lo yachzir, but lo yadu bo rabim." But if the people do not know about it, meaning to say, if the people don't know about it, that you can revoke the vow and there's no fine, then you can revoke the vow, no problem. They didn't penalize her, and so therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says, we're not concerned that she's going to be messed up. We're not concerned that you're going to eventually revoke the vow. So we say under these circumstances as follows. So we say, Rabbi Meir Omer Kol Neder, one more position. Rabbi Meir says, Any neder where she would need to go to chakiras chacham that the husband wouldn't be able to know on his own because it's not something that's between him and her, and so therefore he's not going to be able to remarry her. Because Rabbi Meir is of the position that the whole concern is because we're going to be messed up. And so therefore, by this, because by this, there could be a mistake, because he would have said, listen, if I had known I could go to a chacham, I never would have divorced her. But if it was between him and her, he could have done it himself. Then if then he can marry her back, because he could have annulled the vow and he couldn't make such a claim. So we say, Rameir says, "Kol neder shetar chakiras chacham lo yachzir, she'ein tzarich chakiras chacham yachzir." So Amar Rabbi Elazar. So Rabbi Elazar says, "Lo azur tzarich el nesha eino tzarich," and Rabbi Elazar said, "No." Rabbi Elazar said to Rameir just the opposite. They didn't prohibit the husband to remarry her when he divorced her on account of the neder because of the fact that he might need the chacham to annul her. Only because of Eino Tzarech. The whole reason why they don't allow him to remarry a woman whose vow could have been annulled by the Chacham is only because of a situation where you don't need the Chacham, where the husband could have annulled the vow. Meaning to say that in a case where the Chacham could have annulled it, you wouldn't have needed a reason. The whole reason is because of a case where you didn't need the Chacham. So the Gemara is going to discuss all that, but the Gemara says, "My taima the Rabbi Yehuda." What's the reason why Rabbi Yehuda says that a vow that was made in front of a group of people cannot be annulled? And so therefore, if he divorced her on account of such a vow, they penalized him that he's not allowed to remarry her. Because he says, it says in the verse, that the Jewish, when the Gibeonites made a vow against deceive Joshua, and they made the Jewish people take a vow that they wouldn't attack the Gibeonites in battle, they couldn't annul that vow, and that's because it was made in public. The Kama Rabim, and how many people is considered a majority? If Nachman Bar Yitzchak says Shlosha, he says it's 3, and we learned that out from the Ziva woman, because it says Yamim Shnayim, Rabim Shlosha. And Rabbi Yitzchak says Asara. He says it's a majority is 10. Eida Ksiv Behu. Because we learned this out from the word Eida. And Rabbi Meir says Kol Neder Shetzarech. Rabbi Meir, so Kol Neder Shetzarech Hakiras Lachem Ol Yachzir. Rabbi Meir says any vow that requires the community, the scholar, you cannot remarry. Rabbi Elazar Amar Lo Asru. So what's the nature of the dispute? Rameir says, Adam Rosa should dispazo ishta bebezin. Rameir says, I don't care that she would have to go to court. The husband wouldn't care. And so therefore, Rameir says that any vow that would have required a chacham, that wouldn't have been enough. He wouldn't have cared if she would have to go to the court. Well, he wouldn't have cared that she'd have to go to the court. And so therefore, if he would have known, then if he would have known from the outset that she could have gone there, he never would have divorced her, because he wouldn't have cared if she'd have to go to the court. Whereas Rabbi Elazar says, the husband doesn't want his wife to go to the court. So even though she could have annulled by going to the court, he still couldn't have made that claim because he wouldn't have wanted her to go to the court in the first place. So okay, well, let's stop here. But before we stop, I want to just say a few words. I want to see